Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another edition of Sports Talk Philadelphia here on LeSean TV. I'm Tyler Harper, and if I must say so myself, I'd say we've got a great show lined up today, mainly because, well, the guy in the middle. So let me introduce to my panel, Philadelphia Inquirer columnist and proud LaSalle alum, Mike Sealski. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me, Tyler. I appreciate it.
And down the far end, of course, a superstar in his own right, we got Tommy McIntyre. Tommy, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Tyler.
All right, now let's dive right into, of course, the story that's on everyone's mind right now. Eagles-Packers, let's pull up the score. Obviously, it wasn't pretty right from the beginning as Packers routing the Eagles 53-20. Eddie Lacy, 10 carries, 114 total yards, a rushing and receiving touchdown. But Eagles did have some bright spots. Jordan Matthews, 5 catches, over 100 yards and another touchdown. Jeremy Maclin, 9 catches for 93 yards and a touchdown. Guys, just talk about how right from the beginning, of course, one of the first plays from scrimmage, Aaron Rodgers airing that pass out to Jordy Nelson. I think right from there, some Eagles fans began to worry that it was going to be a long day. Just talk about how, from top to bottom, the Packers really just knew what they were doing against the Eagles.
Well, I mean, the Packers have the best quarterback in the NFL. With all due apologies to Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, I would take Aaron Rodgers over just about anybody. And in that first half, you could see why. I mean, some of those throws were incredible, starting with that pass play to Nelson. And the Eagles really had no answer for that defensively. You know, you're going to play a single high safety, as the Eagles usually do, and play man coverage on the outside with Bradley Fletcher and CarterWilliams. You do that against Aaron Rodgers, you're going to get the results that you saw. And they couldn't generate any pass rush. And when they did, he eluded it. And hence, long day.
Yeah, I mean, the two things going into the day that you knew was going to have to happen for the Eagles to win is to get pressure on the quarterback and Aaron Rodgers, and then also to be able to score and be able to really, they were going to have to battle offensively. Their offense was going to have to come out of the gates and be able to score and match their offense, the Packers. And they weren't able to do that. Like you said, Bradley Fletcher got lit up all day long. It was not a good showing for Bradley Fletcher at all, and for a lot of that secondary. And it definitely was a tough game to watch as a fan. And even in that, when you show the stats of Jeremy Maclin getting a touchdown at the end, it was just too little too late.
Yeah, I'd say that. Just how good, I mean, I guess we can try to use this game and the week before against Carolina as a gauge. Just how good is this Philadelphia Eagles team? Because, I mean, they were able to take advantage of a struggling Carolina team, but against another top-tier team in the NFC like the Packers, I mean, from the very beginning, they almost didn't stand a chance. So try to gauge right now, how good are the Philadelphia Eagles?
The Philadelphia Eagles are, I mean, when you're playing a team like with a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, who is the best in the league right now.
And not only that, but he's having the run of his career.
Yes, he's going off. I mean, definitely Super Bowl hopes for the Packers are very high right now, considering how well they're playing. But, I mean, the Eagles are a good team. I mean, they're playing in a division that's not very good. I mean, the Cowboys are going to be a tough matchup in the Thanksgiving game and then later in the season. But the Eagles right now have to step up against their next game coming up against Tennessee. And we're going to have to see. People are going to have to step up. People are going to have to show. McCoy's going to have to somehow get back to a little bit where he was. And we're going to talk about that a little later of where he was last season. But right now, they're in. I would say they're a little shaky, but I'm confident they're going to make the playoffs, and they're still going to win this division.
I would agree with that. I think it's hard to tell at this point exactly what kind of team they are. I think, in a way, they're put at a disadvantage because expectations were relatively low last season. And they exceeded them by going 10-6 and winning the division and finishing second in the league in points and you know, Chip Kelly showing that, yeah, I can make the transition from being a successful college coach to being a successful NFL coach. Well, now you have expectations this season, and you're still kind of waiting for them to get the kind of victory that says, okay, we can be a team in adverse situations, a team that's regarded as being better than we are, clearly, which I think few people expected them to go into Green Bay last week and win.
Right.
But it's the way that they lost that makes you go, maybe there's a lot of prettiness on the outside here, and maybe what's inside isn't quite as strong as we thought it might be.
Yeah, because, I mean, on the show last week, I myself predicted the Packers to win, but by a score of 28-17, they exceeded that before halftime. So just, again, top to bottom on the Packers, really just taking control of the Eagles. And the main reason why is our SDP player of the week, Aaron Rodgers. Of course, as the graphic says, Mr. Rodgers' neighborhood. And Lambeau clearly has been that for Aaron Rodgers. 22 for 36, 341 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and 32 rushing yards of his own. Guys, as the graphic says, I mean, just another day for Aaron Rodgers, right?
He's he's the best player, I think, in the league. I mean, there's a lot of discussion about J.J. Watt with the Houston Texans and what he brings to the table as a defensive end and a part-time tight end. But quarterback is still the most influential position probably in sports. And Aaron Rodgers is at the top of his game right now. And you saw the difference between a team in the Packers who are centered around a superstar quarterback and a team like the Eagles, which is kind of centered around Chip Kelly's system, and in which the quarterback becomes not necessarily an afterthought, but really only has to be competent to get the offense going the way it should go. And in the second half of that game, Mark Sanchez wasn't even quite that. He turned the ball over 4 times.
Right. Tommy, your thoughts on Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, I mean, Aaron Rodgers just really showed his poise in the pocket, his ability to really get away from the pass rush that the Eagles were lucky enough to get sometimes against them. His legs. I mean, people don't realize how good of a mobile quarterback he is. I mean, we watched Nick Foles earlier this year and how non of a mobile quarterback he is. And he using his legs, able to get out of the pocket, able to gain yards with his feet, really just really pulled the mat right out of the Eagles' defense, because when he picked up a first down like that, it was like, how are we going to stop this guy? And that's what the score was 50-23, because we just couldn't stop him.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I said on the show last week, and obviously with his performance last week, it still holds true. I think this guy's MVP hands down right now. Would you guys agree?
I would. I mean, look at what happened when he missed the game that the Eagles played at Lambeau last year. The Eagles won 27-13, and the Packers were never really in it. So, yeah, he makes that much of a difference.
Yeah, he's definitely favored for MVP right now. I mean, I think you're going to have to wait out. You still got weeks to go. But as long as they continue this, they wind up winning their division, the North, NFC North. He's definitely MVP favorite right now.
All right, and now let's move on to some of Aaron Rodgers' weapons that, of course, shined against CarterWilliams and Bradley Fletcher. I, of course, speak of the Packers receivers, Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb. For Jordy Nelson, 4 catches, 109 yards, and a touchdown. For Randall Cobb, 10 catches, 129 yards. I mean, obviously these receivers are good, but are they this good normally, or do you think this is part of the Aaron Rodgers effect? Because we've seen this with quarterbacks before, and even with a Rodgers former receiver like James Jones, who goes out to Oakland, we haven't heard from him since. So, Tommy, how good are Nelson and Cobb?
I mean, Nelson's been good for a while. I mean, people forget Nelson had a really good game in that Super Bowl win against the Steelers that year. He actually could have been arguably the MVP of that game if it wasn't for Aaron Rodgers being so good. So Nelson's been around for years and been a very good receiver. But I mean, you have to realize he does have Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. And I mean, you saw Greg Jennings leaving. Now is with Minnesota. He's not really making anything for himself because he doesn't have that quarterback in Aaron Rodgers to really give him those targets, give him those deep passes. So those two receivers are very talented, but with a quarterback and the talent of Aaron Rodgers, that's definitely going to boost your numbers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think Jordy Nelson could play anywhere and be a number 1 or a number 2 receiver. Randall Cobb is very talented too, but Tommy makes a good point that it's kind of a chicken or egg question. You know, does the quarterback make the receivers, or do the receivers make the quarterback? And I think in this case, Aaron Rodgers, because of his talent, because he can throw any pass virtually anywhere at any speed he wants to, probably has a little bit more to do with the production of these receivers than the receivers would, elevating another quarterback.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, that's why fantasy owners love getting receivers from even third stringers from Denver, from New Orleans, and from Green Bay, because they know with quarterbacks like Breeze, Rodgers, and Manning, and Brady, etc., they know those guys are going to find the players no matter what. Now, you guys brought this up a little bit earlier, but the play of the Eagles cornerbacks, should this have been an area that should have been a little more addressed in the offseason? Because a lot of people were kind of curious about Williams and Fletcher coming back, and obviously with the performance they showed last week, a lot of people are a little concerned right now at the cornerback position.
Well, there are 2 things I think you have to take into consideration. One of them is that, I don't recall this off the top of my head, you'd have to look back at the free agent market for cornerbacks to see, okay, were there players who were significant upgrades over Williams and Fletcher, and could the Eagles have gotten them? How much would it have cost? Salary cap ramifications, all that sort of thing.
Right.
The other thing you have to take into consideration is that Chip Kelly and Bill Davis, as defensive coordinator, like big cornerbacks. And Williams and Fletcher are that. So that's part of the reason you don't see Brandon Boykin playing on the outside, is because he's a smaller corner. So if you have, from a size standpoint, the kind of guys you want for your system, it's going to take some persuading to replace them, and I don't think they were ready to do that yet. Having said that, it doesn't make them very good.
Right. Tommy?
Yeah, I mean, I was on the bandwagon. Mike mentioned Brandon Boykin. I was on the bandwagon all year to have Brandon Boykin go on the outside because I think he is a very good cornerback. But like he said, I mean, They just were not going for that. I mean, they've been all year. I've heard in Chip Kelly press conferences and Bill Davis press conferences all year that our corners are fine. Our corners are good. The media doesn't know what they're talking about. That's Chip Kelly's used those words. They're trying to say, like, media doesn't know what they're talking about. We believe in our guys. We're not trusting anybody else. But, I mean, you have to we saw on Sunday what happened. Those corners are not the greatest corners in the world, especially Bradley Fletcher. CarterWilliams will have his games where he's off, but he's a solid corner. But Bradley Fletcher, he's not the best of corners in the league.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And now let's move from the defense side of the ball to the offense as we see the stats on now Eagles quarterback Mark Sanchez. We may as well just have a Sanchez talk segment on this show every week. 26 for 44, 346 passing yards, 2 touchdown passes, but of course, 2 interceptions, 2 fumbles. And, you know, I'm on the belief here, as you can see on the graphic, of don't panic yet. Mike, you're no stranger to Mark Sanchez as you covered him with the Jets.
Yeah, I worked in New York for a few years and covered Mark while he was with the Jets and I was with the Wall Street Journal. What you saw and what the Eagles have seen through 3 weeks of Mark Sanchez is generally what Mark Sanchez is. You want to try to limit his opportunities to mess things up, if you will. I mean, he played a clean game 2 weeks ago against Carolina, but in the game before that, in 3/4 of action, he had thrown 2 interceptions against the Texans. And then last week, again, after the game got out of hand, he turns the ball over 4 times. So the Eagles are going to kind of have to ride this out. They don't have any other option, so to speak, in terms of saying, well, if Mark's not playing well, we can do this or that. The running game, which I'm sure we're going to get to, isn't what it was last season, so that creates a problem that puts more of a burden on Sanchez, and that could be problematic. You have to hope that he starts playing one clean game after another. Otherwise, the Eagles are going to have some problems.
That's right. Tommy, your thoughts on
Sanchez?
Sanchez?
Yeah, I mean, you saw that he threw 44 times. I don't want Sanchez throwing that many times in a game. I would stick him around like most 30, 35 times a game. And I think a big problem about in this game is that we got out to double-digit deficit really early in the game. So our running game never had a chance to really get out the gate. I mean, I didn't think they were running terribly when they did run, but at that point it was like, how can you run when you're down by this much points? So you had to rely on Sanchez, and when you do that, that's a problem. I mean, you remember from the days with the Jets, when he made it to those back-to-back AFC Championship games, they had a great defense. They were able to hold teams. He was able to stay in the game. He was able to manage his time. They had an actual running game for a little bit when he was there, when they were actually good, and that's how he was able to win. And now here, if we're not able to have a running game, if we're not able to hold teams to not getting too much points, it's going to be hard for us to compete in this league.
That's right, and Mike, you brought it up earlier with the running game. Let's take a look at the main guy in the running game, LeSean McCoy. As you can see here, the real McCoy. 2013, obviously, we know the story, 314 rushes, over 1,600 yards, 9 touchdowns. But this year, 196 rushes, 729 yards, and 2 touchdowns. This is kind of a repeat graphic because I used this a few weeks back, and back then he only had 1 touchdown. Now he has 1 more. Is it time to, I don't want to say panic, but how worried are you about Shady and the fact that it's now week 12 and he's not all there?
Well, I mean, I think it's a complex problem. I think you've had injuries, obviously, along the offensive line, and since Jason Kelce and Evan Mathis have come back, the line hasn't clicked in the same way that it did last season. So I think that's the primary contributor to why LeSean hasn't produced in the way he has. The interesting question is beyond the season, because his salary and cap hit next season is, I believe, $11 or $11.5 million, which is pretty pricey.
Right.
So the question for Chip Kelly becomes, if you think there's another cheaper option out there who can run your offense as effectively because you're Chip Kelly and you think you're brilliant, and to a large extent you are, then okay, do the Eagles cut LeSean McCoy?
It's almost sounding like the Deshaun Jackson situation.
A little bit, it really is. And I think if you shot Shady up with sodium pentothal, he might say the same thing. You know, if you give him some truth serum, he'd say, they might get rid of me.
Right. Tommy?
I think I would say I'm worried for Shady because you see when actually Sproles gets the ball. I mean, he only had 2 carries on Sunday against the Packers, had 21 yards. They don't give him the ball enough, and when you see him getting the ball, he does well. So that alone just tells me that Shady is not playing up to what we're used to seeing from him. He's not hitting the holes. He's indecisive. He's trying early in the year. He's trying to go east-west instead of north-south, and that's a problem. I think, like Mike was saying about the offensive line, that's been a problem all year for the Eagles, but also for Shady because he can't trust him. He doesn't know who to go behind. He's not seeing the holes like he used to. And that's scary. And for the Eagles to be a team that you can hope for win a playoff game this year, you're going to need Shady.
Yeah, I agree with that. And now we go into our prediction poll for this Sunday's game against Carolina. I have the Eagles winning big in this game because they need it. I have 38-14 for the Birds, and I have Connor Barwin as my MVP just because really the defense needs to get that confidence back. And if that front group, especially the linebackers, especially Connor Barwin, can get to the quarterback, apply pressure, and really take advantage of a struggling Tennessee team, should be all systems go. Now, Mike, as you can see, we got some question marks. So
sure,
who you got?
I like to surprise people.
All right.
No, I mean, I think the Eagles should win this game easily. I would say 30-14. I think the Titans have a very young quarterback in Zach Mecklenburg, and that's a this is the prime sort of game for the Eagles to kind of reestablish themselves. I mean, it's really a no-win situation for them. If they kill the Titans, well, that's what you expect them to do. Exactly. And if they lose, then all of a sudden the city is in a panic. So I would say 30-14. I would say, actually, I think LeSean's going to have a pretty big game. So, yeah, I guess that's about it.
All right, and Tommy, you have 28-14, and you have old reliable Jeremy Maclin as your standout star.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a bounce-back game for the Eagles. I mean, Tennessee is not up to the caliber of the Packers, and I think Jeremy Maclin, I mean, he had another solid game against Green Bay, and I think this is another one. You're going to need him to step up. You're going to hope that Mark Sanchez can find him, and hopefully they do get I would love to see LeSean McCoy really be the MVP because you need that running game to start going, and yeah, so hopefully they can get a W.
I'd love that too, mainly because obviously I'm an Eagles fan, but I'm also a proud fantasy owner. So just saying. But with that, we move on to one of the teams that plays in the Wells Fargo Center, the Philadelphia Flyers, who've been struggling a little bit of late. Last time we were on, they won 3 games. Now they've lost 3 games in a row. 6 goals for, 12 goals allowed, 3-game losing streak. What changed in this 6-game span? I mean, you could talk maybe about the long layoff. Do you think that had something to do with it?
I probably did, but it's also the NHL season is a long, long period of time, and teams are going to go through fallow stretches like this where they just don't play well. I mean, the Flyers are shorthanded defensively. You play in Montreal one night on a Saturday night, which is always a tough place to play. They don't match up particularly well against the Rangers, and you saw that last night. They get beat 2-0. And then you have Ron Hextall, the general manager, tearing the paint off the locker room walls after the game. So this is going to happen. We've seen this before. I have faith that they'll pull out of it. They are what they are. They're a relatively mediocre team. They're going to be, a low playoff seed, I would imagine, at some point by the end of the season. So we'll see, but I wouldn't panic yet.
I mean, right now, their penalty kill is really hurting them. I would say that. I think they're like 30th in the league right now in penalty kill. And, I mean, like Mike was talking about the game last night against the Rangers, they've just been terrible in Madison Square Garden over the years. And it's just, I mean, you had Giroux with an ankle injury. You didn't really know if he was going to play or not. It was actually surprising to see him because during the week they thought he wasn't going to play. So it's right now they're going a little funk. I mean, when you hear the Hextall ripping apart the team, I mean, it's definitely a wake-up call. Steve Mason didn't play terrible yesterday, but we just weren't able to do anything. We made him get all these shots on him, and he wasn't able to stop. I mean, 2 going by isn't bad for a guy that had all these shots at him. So, I mean, it's early in the season, and I think that's what we have to wait for. I think they're going to get it together, but right now they're going through a little funk right now. Yeah,
I mean, you mentioned Steve Mason, and Mike, you actually had a really good point on Twitter last night when you said with the way Steve Mason's been bailing the Flyers out, this may have well been game 8 of the Eastern Conference playoff series last year where the Rangers took the Flyers to 7 games, but in the end the Rangers just took hold. But let's go back to Hextall tearing the paint off the walls, as you say. Of course, the exact quote I can't exactly say on air, but I mean, talk about that, and how much should this motivate this team? Do you like the new general manager sinking his teeth into a team like this?
Well, what's interesting about it to me is that Hextall, since he took the job in the summer, has kind of projected this idea of we're going to take our time with this. We're not going to make wholesale changes for the sake of trying to make a championship run right away. We're going to wait for our young prospects on defense to mature. And of course, the best prospect among them, Shane Gostisbehere, is out for months now with torn ACL.
Right.
But there was kind of this dialing down of the Flyerness of the organization. They're kind
culture change, perhaps?
Well, you said it, I didn't. But they've kind of always been on this orange and black hamster wheel year after year after year. And, and Hextall came in and said, okay, we're going to take our time. We'll see what happens this year. There are elite teams in this league, and we're not among them. Well, then you see the competitor in Ron Hextall coming out after a game like last night and a poor effort like last night. So I'm very curious to see now how he reacts as a player personnel guy. Do they go out and make a deal? Do they do something to shake things up from a personnel standpoint?
Right. Well, now let's move on to the other team in the Wells Fargo Center. I, of course, speak of the Philadelphia 76ers, who No, they have not still won a game yet. Let's see the graphic. 0 for 11 so far this season. Tony Roten still the scoring leader with 19.1 points per game. Henry Sims taking over the rebounding lead with about 6 even rebounds per game. Tommy, we'll start with you. Do we have to worry about the longest losing streak again, and do we have to do it this early?
Yes, we do. I mean, it's getting longer and longer. When you lose to the Celtics, the team is not very good, and you lose to them by 11. Their fourth quarters are just so bad. They're not able. They don't have any shooters on their team. It's like no one can really drop any. They have no one to rely on. You get Michael CarterWilliams back, and he's still shaky. He hasn't played all summer with a shoulder injury, so you're still gonna have to wait a little bit to see if he can get back to form. It's scary, and they need to get a win fast because it's possible for them to get a long streak again.
Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, it is possible, and I haven't had a chance to talk to him. He hasn't talked to anybody, but I would like to know what Sam Hinkie thinks of this. I mean, I've talked to him on a number of occasions about his plan for rebuilding the franchise, and it's one that I think is smart. I think it's logical, and I think it does give them, years down the road, an opportunity at competing for a championship, which is something they haven't had for the 10 previous years before he arrived. But that's the analytical part of it. The emotional and immediate part of it is, oh my gosh, do we have to watch this team every night, and when are they going to get a win? And that becomes harder and harder to ignore with each passing game. So are they going to win anytime soon? I'm not certain. Now, the other factor, and Tommy kind of alluded to this with respect to the Celtics not being a very good team. I do think when the Sixers win, it'll be against a team that is regarded as very good, and yet maybe gives a couple of its star players a night off, or just decides, you know what, tonight's vacation night, fellas, and they get jumped by the Sixers, who do play hard, play to the best of their ability, but just aren't very good.
Right, and Tommy mentioned Michael Carter-Williams. Let's see Michael Carter-Williams' stats right now through his first 4 games. An even 16 points per game, 6 rebounds a game, and 4.7 assists. This doesn't look too bad to me so far. I mean, obviously, he's still got to work out the kinks of his game, but Tommy, I don't know about you, but I think MCW is looking pretty good right now.
Well, you didn't put the other stats on there. He's shooting under 40% from the floor. I mean, he did that last year. He was only shooting a little
Somebody's
bit.
Somebody's got to shoot on this team.
And he's turning over the ball 4.5 times a game so far in his first 5 games. Now, it was his first start yesterday. That was first Nerlens Noel and him starting together. And Michael Carter-Williams is not the Michael Carter-Williams of last year just yet. And what's scary about this is how bad the team is he going to take on bad habits? And I think that's been a really scary part of how bad the Sixers are when you have a young star, Rookie of the Year, Michael Carter-Williams, is will he take on these bad habits? Will he feel he has to score more? Will he feel like he doesn't know who to trust? He can't pass anybody because no one can shoot. So it's like he could take on some bad habits, and that's a scary part as a Sixers fan, because the future, if you want him to be a talented team, you want him to be a contender in the NBA, will he bring these bad habits when they actually do get good?
That's true. And real quickly, let's take a look at the Atlantic Division standings, because despite the fact that the Sixers are winless, every other team besides the first place Raptors is under 500 in this division. So real quick, guys, is that any sort of comfort, or are these other teams going to get on a roll and not lay the Sixers in the dust per se? But
well, it'll be comforting if on Saturday night they can beat the Knicks. I think that would kind of be poetic justice for them, in the sense that the Knicks are always trying to win now, and they've become kind of a laughing stock around the NBA for their failure to win now. So that would be, from a Sixers standpoint, that would be kind of satisfying, I would think.
Tommy?
Yeah, I mean, you want to see, I mean, the division's sake, I mean, these teams, I mean, the Celtics, just like the Sixers are in a real building mode. The Knicks aren't, but they are in a little bit. I mean, they know that they're not there yet, so they are in a real building mode at the same time, but they would like to win now. And then the Raptors are just the best team in the division.
Yeah. All right, so now we go on to our favorite segment here, and that is, of course, the Fast 5 segment, 5 quick questions for the panel. Mike, we're going to start with you. What's one of your favorite articles? Just doesn't have to be the most favorite, but one of your favorite articles off the top of your head that you've written, and for any reason.
I did a column in the summertime for Father's Day about my son, Evan,
Very good
his fondness for the Phillies. And so, yeah, I would say that. I would say the column I wrote in June about my son.
Very good column, definitely a must-read. Now, Tommy, with Thanksgiving coming up next week, so we won't have a show next week, besides turkey, what's your favorite food to eat on Thanksgiving Day?
I'm a big mashed potatoes fan, so mashed potatoes, definitely. And I don't even put gravy on it either. I just like mashed potatoes.
Ooh, all right.
Good homemade mashed potatoes.
Me, personally, I like a good side of stuffing with my turkey. All right. Mike, who's your favorite athlete that you've ever interviewed?
Favorite in terms of just talking to him or her?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I would say probably Jake Voracek from the Flyers. Very open, very accessible, very funny young man.
All right. Now, Tommy, Giancarlo Stanton just signed a contract worth $325 million. If you were given that much money, what do you spend it on first?
Oh my gosh! I would just I would just be a J.J. Watt and say I would just search like what
Just
do I
Google
what do I
how
need
rich
to
people
spend
spend
on
money?
that money. I wouldn't know what to buy. I don't even have an answer.
You know what? That's a fair point. I would honestly, I'd probably just go and buy like something simple like
Yeah, I
groceries
don't
to start
even
out.
know.
Lastly, we go to Mike Sealski. Another favorite of yours? Favorite event you ever covered? Whether it was a certain game that had meaning or
The chance to cover two things: the chance to cover the Eagles in the Super Bowl in 2005. As somebody who grew up a Philadelphia sports fan, and then the chance to be there for Game 5 of the 2008 World Series. And,
were you there for all the parts of it?
for both parts, yes, for the first part of it, and then for the second part of it, and then to be able after Brad Lidge struck out Eric Hinsky for the final out, to be able to call my dad and say, "Hey, Dad, we just watched the Phillies win the World Series. I got to go now. I got a job to do. I got to write my column." So that was pretty great.
Well, that's awesome. All right, well, that does it for us this week. Before we go real quick, I mean, as you can see, it's kind of there. Still growing out a mustache for Movember. If you can donate, that'd be great. mobro.co/TylerHarperSTP. Any money will do for this great cause. And, I mean, again, by the next time you see me on STP, I'll be clean shaven. So get your donations in now. With that, that'll do it for us this week. But you can keep track of us online. Of course, we have a great social media presence. Facebook.com/SportsTalk Philadelphia. On Twitter, we are at LaSalle TV Philly. For email, lasalletv@lasalle.edu. You can see all our full episodes on YouTube, youtube.com/LaSalle56TV. And lastly, we are just on the web in general, lasalle.edu/LaSalleTV. Well, again, a huge thank you to Mike for coming on. Thank you for Tommy coming on. And thank you for watching. I'm Tyler Harper, and we'll see you after Thanksgiving to talk about Eagles-Cowboys. Thanks for joining us.